1.
All right, today we are going to be diving into ADHD, the statistics, common behaviors, and classroom interventions to be able to work with students that have ADHD or to work with classes in general. So, attention what? What is ADHD? I've never heard about it. Tell me more. ADHD stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, and this is a disorder that has three different types. On this next slide, we will go into a little bit of a greater detail on these types. So there is inattentive, hyperactive, or a student or a person who has ADHD. It might be both of these things. So in the classroom, even outside of the classroom, what might a person with ADHD who is the inattentive type, what would they look like? This type of person, you might catch them daydreaming a lot, not being able to focus for long periods. They may not seem to be able to follow directions. He or she might avoid tasks, and he or she might be forgetful. So, somebody with the inattentive type is just that. They have hard time paying attention. So they might be quiet. It looks like they're kind of their mind's kind of somewhere else. You're giving directions, instructing students how to do something, and it just seems like they're not listening, or like they are listening, but for not very long at all. And if you tell the student directions, it's not that they aren't listening or that they didn't hear you, it's just that they lost attention earlier on. So it seems like they can't follow your directions, and they're more than capable of it. It might just have been too much to take in at once. And then these students, because they do have trouble with attention span, they might be avoiding tasks that take a lot of time or a lot of effort or a lot of resources. That just seems to bog them down and make them feel a little bit incapable. And then also, these students will struggle with their memory. They might tell you the same thing more than once, or they might need to be told the same thing more than once. You may hear a lot of stories that you've already heard from this child. Um, Let's look at the next type. So, in the classroom for hyperactive children, these are students that have a lot of energy. You might see them moving around a lot, squirming, fidgeting. They might be loud, they talk a lot, or they talk out of turn. And like I already mentioned, they are energetic. So you might say, this sounds like a normal kid to me. The thing with ADHD, though, these students, it's a persistent behavior. This kind of hyperactivity, it happens more often than it doesn't happen. So it's not like, oh, my kid right now, he just woke up from a nap, and so he has a lot of energy he needs to burn. This is somebody who cannot sit still for more than 5 minutes, for more than an hour for your lecture. So this is somebody that is always moving or always talking or speaking without raising their hand or interrupting your lesson. Um, and for a person who has both of these, they will display, of course, um, characteristics from both. So they might squirm and they might be forgetful. And ADHD does not look the same for everybody whatsoever. So ADHD for one person can be the energy, and for another person, it can be the sort of constant memory loss. Um, and even more in depth than that, this is again a disorder that covers a huge umbrella. It's a very large category. So now that I know a little bit more about it, is this covered by IDEA? ADHD would be considered other health impaired. So it is a disability by IDEA standards, and the child is eligible for IDEA services sometimes. However, it is not a specific learning disability like dyslexia, for example. And so that's where this sometimes comes into play. So, because for ADHD, a lot of times people do not have too much trouble functioning um, with this disorder. They might be a little hyperactive, or they might be a little inattentive, but they don't even want to take medication for it. They don't really even want to talk to somebody about it. They can still get their work done, and it's no problem. It might just be a little bit of a setback, or a little bit of a hurdle to overcome, but it's not restricting their day-to-day successfulness. So when a child will qualify for IDEA with ADHD is when this student has ADHD and another disability. So they might have ADHD and dyslexia. And so that's making it really difficult for the student. And so this student might really need a specific IEP or 504 plan, or this student might need an IEP or 504 plan if they only have ADHD, but their ADHD is so hyper functioning that it makes it hard for them to do other tasks without having a specific plan for them individually. And then, is this common? It is rather common. So 11% of US children have it. And so if you have a class, this can be anywhere from a little over 3% to 10% of students within your class. You have to think about 11% of US children. How does that make sense with the 3.3 to 10%? This is because, of course, this demographic isn't just concentrated in your 5 and 6 year old kindergarten class. US children would be, from the age of 2 till the age of 18. So kind of spreads out that 11%. A little areas are, some certain age groups are a little more concentrated than others, but this would be 6.1 million children in the year of 2016, and this has been a pretty large increase, over 40%, since the year 2003 of documented cases of ADHD. So, where is this increase coming from? So, doctors note that there could be a couple of different factors. There could be, it could be genetics. Maybe a lot of people have had ADHD in the past, and they're having lots of kids, and then their kids are getting this disorder. It could be environment. The world's always changing. Diet, that too. We've seen a lot of changes in diet in Americans. Lack of sleep, too much technology. But mainly doctors think that it is really just because the disorder has better recognition and people aren't as nervous to get diagnosed. There's not so much of a stigma surrounding mental health as there used to be. ADHD is rather common, and so people aren't so afraid of getting their children tested for it and actually having them get help, because there is a lot of research surrounding disorders that are like this and the benefits that come from actually having people intervene and helping out. So, classroom intervention. How can I see positive results from my classroom if I have a classroom full of students where they are all crazy, bouncing off the walls? I can never get them to listen. And this isn't a class that is all ADHD students. This is just a class that you might have some trouble with, and ADHD students are, of course, in this class. As we looked at statistics, more than likely you will have some ADHD students within your class. But where can I get better results from my students? How can I make them be interested in learning? How can I make them listen? You can keep an eye on what students are doing. So rather than just being the teacher that sits at the back of your desk while your students are working, you might want to be more present, walk around, say, hey, what are you working on? How can I help you? Talking to them on the playground, talking to them in the lunchroom, really being a part of their life. Enforcing rules, of course, at the beginning of the school year, saying these are the rules, and then making sure that they